My respected elders, my brothers, my sisters, and my little ones. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. After praising the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salutations on Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I begin as always by first thanking you, my host, for giving me this opportunity to convey the message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I pray to the Almighty Allah that Allah accepts these efforts of yours in listening to this message. As I pray to the Almighty Allah that Allah accepts these efforts of mine in delivering this message. My friends, our beloved Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was so merciful, was so kind, was so loving, was so caring, that the mercy of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam knew no bounds and limits. And this is why the Quran so rightly describes our beloved Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in the words, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. He was a mercy for the world. He was a mercy for the humankind. He was a mercy for the jinn kind. He was a mercy for the animal kind. So merciful that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam could not tolerate the suffering of anyone or anything. Not even the suffering of beasts. Not even the suffering of animals. And this is why, my young friends, sometimes you would hear Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saying and informing his companions of how he once saw a woman in Jahannam burning in hell because she would not feed her cat, and nor would she release her cat so it could feed from the worms of the earth. Sometimes you would hear Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam crying with the words, "Man faji'a hadhihi." Who has put this mother to distress with regards to her young ones? Who was alarmed this mother with regards to her young ones? As one of his companions had taken the young of a bird and he'd separated them from the mother. And as soon as the mother realized, the mother came flying quickly to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, hovering around Rasulullah's head, begging for help. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw this mother in distress, he cried, "Man faji'a hadhihi." Who has put this mother to distress with regards to her young ones? Who has alarmed her? Rudduhuma mawdi'ahuma. Quickly take these young ones and reunite them with the mother. Quickly take them and place them where you took them from. Can you not see the distress? And can you not see the suffering that you have caused this mother by separating her flesh and blood from her? Sometimes you would see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that a camel would come and he would literally cry before Rasulullah. Tears would flow from his eyes, making a yearning sound, complaining to the Messenger of Allah of how it has been overworked and how it has been starved. You will see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wiping the temple of the head and stroking the back of this camel till the eyes are flowing with tears no more, and the camel is at ease, warning the owner and the master, ألا تتق الله في هذه البهيمة التي ملكك الله إياها. O my companion, do you not fear Allah with regards to this beast that Allah has given you in your possession, that you overwork the beast and then you starve the beast and you don't look after the beast? Sometimes you would see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam crying with the words, "O my companion, هلا أحدثت شفرتك." Why didn't you sharpen your knife before this? As one of his companions had taken a goat and he put the goat on the ground, and as he was about to slaughter the goat, he began to sharpen the knife before the very eyes of the goat. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam cried, "Aturidu an tumituha mawtatayn." O my companion, why are you making this goat suffer twice? Do you want to kill it twice? You are sharpening your knife before right before its eyes. Why didn't you sharpen your knife before this? Sometimes you would hear him crying with the words, "Inna amamaka al-qisas." As one of his companions had marked his camel on his face He said to Junada, Ya Junada, فَمَا وَجَدْتَ عُضْوًا تَصِمُهُ إِلَّا فِي الْوَجْهِ. Couldn't you find any other limb other than the face, that you marked your camel on the face? Inna amamaka al-qisas. Oh my dear companion, you think nothing of this in this world, but I swear by Allah, there will be qisas on the day of judgment, and retaliation will take place, even with regards to the beast. My question to you, my young friends, is today, our Prophet of Allah, our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was so merciful and so kind, that the mercy of Rasulullah knew no bounds and limits, and he could not even tolerate the suffering of beasts. And the suffering of beasts would bring tears to his eyes. It would alarm him. It would distress him. It would change the beautiful color of the face of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This Prophet of Allah and this Prophet of mercy, what regard do you think he had for his ummatis, for those that declared La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, the very people for whom he'd spend the entire night in prostration with tears flowing from his eyes, and he would beg the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi to shower mercy upon those that declare La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. What regard do you think Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had for the believers? And what lengths do you think Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, the Prophet of mercy, went to alleviate the suffering of those that were suffering, and to remove the cries of those that were crying? How do you think he responded to those that were in need? It is a fact that there was nothing more dear to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam than standing before the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi. So much so that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself has said, "Ju'ilat qurratu aini fi salat," that the contentment of my eyes lies when I stand before my Creator, when I converse with Him. And as a result of this, because of the buzz that he would get and the good feeling that he would get when he would stand before his Creator and he would converse with Him, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would stand for hours on end. So much so that the hadith states, "Hatta tawarramat qadama," that the blessed feet of Rasulullah would begin to sweat and swelter. And when the Sahaba would see that the feet of Rasulullah are swelling, pitying Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would turn around and say to him, "Ya Rasulullah, why do you exert yourself? Why do you stand for hours on end before your Creator? Such is your status. وَقَدْ غَفَرَ اللَّهُ لَكَ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ." You are second to the Almighty Allah. Allah has overlooked all your mistakes and sins and faults. You don't need to do this. He would respond, if that is the case, that Allah has blessed Muhammad in such a manner that he is second to the Almighty Allah, and Allah has overlooked his wrongs, أَفَلَا أَكُونَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. This isn't a blessing in itself. And this is it not because of this that Muhammad should increase his worship and stand before Allah for even longer and longer? In one rakat, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sometimes would read the 7 longest surahs of the Quran. He would begin, Alif Lam Mim Zalikal Kitab La Rayba Fi Hudan lil Muttaqin, and after Surah Baqarah he would begin Imran. After Surah Imran he would begin Nisa. After Nisa, A'raf, An'am, Ma'idah, the 7 longest surahs of the Quran. And then he would recite the Quran in such a manner that the hadith says tartilan, so slowly that every word of the Quran could be understood. And then whenever he came across a verse in which there was glorification, he would stop there and he would glorify Allah. Whenever he came across a verse in which there was the mention of paradise, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would stop and he would ask Allah for paradise. Whenever he came across a verse in which there was the mention of Jahannam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would stop there and he would ask Allah for protection from Jahannam. This is how one rakat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. This is how his qiyam was. When he went into ruku, it was no different. When he went into prostration, it was like the way he stood before the Almighty Allah. This was just one rakat of Rasulullah. And he would do this because of the buzz and contentment that he got when he stood there before Allah, and when he spoke to Him, and when he conversed with Him. But yet this same Prophet of mercy, when he would stand in prayer, and if he heard as much as the cry of one child, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would quickly shorten the prayer, feeling the pain and distress this cry would bring the mother, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would finish off the prayer. And if any person in need ever came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in such a condition that the adhan has been called, more so, even the iqamah has been called, and the Sahaba are standing in their lines in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, waiting for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to come and lead the prayer, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not come to lead the prayer, even though the Sahaba are standing in their lines in the masjid of Rasulullah, till he did not fulfill the need of this person that came to him and that was in distress. Why? لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. What would distress Rasulullah, and what would make Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam grieve, and what would bring tears to the eyes of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was anything that troubled any one of those that declared La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Why? بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. He was full of compassion and love and sympathy for any person that declared La ilaha illallah. This is why we find in the battle of Uhud, when this false rumor has reached Madinatul Munawwara that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been killed, all the women and the children, they leave their homes to find out with regards to the reality of this news that is being spread, and to find out whether their husbands and their brothers and their sons that participated in battle, whether they have been martyred or whether they have been alive. Amongst those that came out to find out the reality was a young boy called Bashir ibn Aqraba al-Juhani. His father had participated in the battle. He's looking everywhere for his father. He can see the other children. They have found their fathers and they are embracing their fathers and they are kissing their father. And he's looking everywhere. He can't find his father. Finally, he comes to the Prophet of Mercy and he says, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I can't see my father anywhere. I can see so and so, he's embracing his father. I can see so and so, he's being picked up by his father. O Messenger of Allah, I beg you, please help me. Telling me where my father is. His father had been martyred. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to the child, Ustushida rahmatullah alayh, your father has been martyred. Your father has gone to meet his creator. May Allah's blessings be with him. He was only a child when he saw that he is now all alone. And there he can see the other children embracing their fathers. Naturally, tears begin to flow from his eyes. When Rasulullah ﷺ saw this scene, the heart of Rasulullah melted and he embraced this child. Not only did he embrace him, he passed his hand over his head with love and affection. And Rasulullah ﷺ said to this child, Bashir ibn Aqraba al-Juhani, O Bashir, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will not let you be like this. Let it be known from today that Muhammad the son of Abdullah is the father of Bashir ibn Aqraba al-Juhani, and Aisha is the mother of Bashir ibn Aqraba al-Juhani. Usama bin Zayd radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was dark in complexion and he had a flat nose. And on one occasion when his forehead took a knock and Sayyidina Usama was beginning to bleed, and our mother Hazrat Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha showed hesitance with regards to wiping the blood. My friends, it was none other than Rasulullah who with his blessed tongue would suck the blood from the forehead of Sayyidina Usama radiyallahu ta'ala anhu and then spit it out. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say, had this Usama been a girl, then I would have beautified her with beautiful clothes and beautiful ornaments, and I would bring home after marriage. The same Usama, he is migrated from Makkah to Medina, only a child. He's suffering from smallpox, and every time his nose would run, none other than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself would wipe the nose of Sayyidina Usama, and then he would wash his face, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would kiss his face. The hadith of Tabrani, Sayyidina Hassan and Hussein, Abu Huraira is with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all of a sudden Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam can hear his children, his grandsons, Hassan and Hussein crying. These were the same Hassan and Hussein who would bring Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to his knees, and they would mount Rasulullah, and Rasulullah would go onto his knees, and these two sons of his would come and sit on his back, and in his house Rasulullah on his knees would walk and pretend to be a horse. This is how much love he had for Hassan and Hussein. And the same Hassan and Hussein, according to this hadith of Tabrani, are now crying. And when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam can hear their cries, he makes his haste to our Hazrat Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anhu's house. And he asks, "Oh Fatima, why is it my sons Hassan and Hussein are crying?" She says, "Ya Rasulullah al-Adsh, there is no water here. And they are suffering and they are crying as a result of thirst." Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam makes haste and he looks in an old water pot to see if there's any water. There was not a single drop of water. Water was very less in those days and it was scarce. Immediately Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam makes an announcement amongst the Sahaba. "Is there anyone from amongst you who has any water? My children are suffering." Immediately the Sahaba respond to the cry of Rasulullah and they begin to check their pots and realize there's not a single drop of water there. What is Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do? His flesh and blood are crying. He says to Fatima, "Oh Fatima, give me one of the sons." And he takes one of the children and he embraces him and he carries him. But this is not enough for this child to stop crying. He's dying of thirst. He needs water. But there is no water anywhere in Madinatul Munawwara. None of the Sahabas a drop of water. What lengths do you think Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to do to alleviate this suffering? When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw there is nothing whatsoever, not even a drop, Rasulullah took out his blessed tongue. How wet do you think the tongue of Rasulullah could have been, that he allowed his sons Hassan and Hussein to suck on the blessed tongue of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which removed the tears from Hassan and Hussein, and these children were at ease? What length do you think Rasulullah would go to just bring a smile on her face? There was a woman in Madinatul Munawwara who was insane, and she would come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she would say to him, "Oh, the Messenger of Allah, Ya Rasulullah, I have a need. I have some work to be done by you." And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew this woman and he knew that this woman was insane. But Allahu Akbar, when this woman would come to Rasulullah, such was the warmth in which Rasulullah would receive this woman that he would say to her, "Ya Umma Fulan, unduri ayya sikiki shiti." You have come to Muhammad, you're asking him for his help. "Oh, the mother of so and so, you choose whichever path you want. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will go with you and he will do your work." And the hadith said this is exactly what Rasulullah would do. She would choose the path and she would go, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would go with her and he would do her work. Can you imagine the smile that this would bring on the face of this woman that was insane and that was in need? The Ashab al-Sufa were the poor and needy of Madinatul Munawwara, and they were the extended family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These people had nothing. They had no families, they had no children, they had no wives, they had nothing. They would live in the masjid with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These people were so poor that Abu Huraira says, "I saw 70 from amongst them. They only had one garment to cover their bodies, and they would wear this garment in such a manner that they would tie it to their necks, and this garment would reach their shins. Then the entire day they would hold their garment in such a manner that none of their privates become exposed or visible. And when they would stand in prayer behind Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were so poor and so much in need that their legs would not be able to carry them, and while Rasulullah would lead the prayer, they would fall flat on their faces." Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would take care of the Ashab al-Sufa. Every evening after prayer, he would make this announcement after prayer, لِيَأْخُذْ كُلُّ رَجُلٍ بِقَدْرٍ مَا عِنْدَهُ, that every person should take as much as he can from the Ashab al-Sufa. Some would come and take one person, some would take 2 people, some would take 5 people. Whoever would remain, whether it was 5 people, whether it was 10 people, or whether it was 20 people, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself would take them home and give them whatever he had. Not once did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever say no. Whatever he had, he would give. You know, if they asked him for a garment in his hand, then I swear by Allah that garment would not reach his home, let alone his blessed body. On one occasion, a woman, on seeing that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on need, she knitted a garment for him, and she gave it to him. "Ya Rasulullah, jitu aksuka hadhihi. I made this for you, I've knitted this for you. Ya Rasulullah, I beg you, take this and wear this." Rasulullah takes the garment, and as soon as one of his companions sees the garment, he says, "Ya Rasulullah, look how beautiful this garment is, give it to me." In spite of the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself was in need, he takes the garment and gives it to his companion. And when they would ask for the garment that he is wearing, Allahu Akbar, even then there was no hesitation. he would take off the garment that he's wearing and he would give it to the person in need, and then he would go and borrow a garment from the likes of Sharabil ibn Hasana and the other companions, and he would wear this garment. When they asked him for food, and you yourselves will know that many a time Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself was suffering. Many a times he barely had any food himself. But when they would ask for food, many a narration you will find these words: Kana yusiru ala nafsih, Kana yuwasin nasa bi nafsih. He would give priority over himself even in this condition. And this is why you would find sometimes he had stones tied to his stomach. Sometimes you would find that the hadith states, كان يبيت الليالي المتتابعا طاويا وأهله لا يجدون عشاء. For consecutive nights, he and his family would have nothing to eat. Sometimes you would hear Rasulullah calling, هذا أول طعام أكله أبوك منذ ثلاثة أيام. Oh Fatima, this is the first meal your father has had in 3 days. And sometimes the new moon would come and go, and there would be no fire lit in the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he and his family would sustain themselves on aswadan, on dates and water. Why? Because whatever they had, they would give. If they so much as asked him for the morsel that was in his hand, I swear by Allah, that morsel that was in the hand of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not reach his mouth. He would give them the morsel. And if they asked for the morsel that was inside his mouth, even then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not hesitate. His mercy and his compassion and his love for his ummah and for those that declare La ilaha illallah knew no bounds and no limits. So much so that even when he had nothing, and there were times when he had nothing in his home and he had nothing with him, no in his hands, no in his pockets, and somebody came to him in need, even then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not turn that man away. He would say to him, go take a loan and tell that person from whom you take a loan that Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, the Al-Amin, the trustworthy one, will repay your loan. Why? Azizun alayhi ma anittum. What would grieve Rasulullah and what would bring tears to the eyes of Rasulullah was this, that he could not tolerate the suffering of any person from amongst his ummah. And I ask you, was it not because of the same reason the likes of Umar Farooq would stay awake during the nights and patrol the streets when the masses would sleep? Because he could not tolerate the suffering of any one of the believers. Awza'i relates that Talha on one occasion, he saw Sayyidina Umar patrolling the streets at night. And he saw him that Umar has entered one house. Then after the first house, he enters a second. He enters a third. He enters the fourth. Talha is having wrong ideas of the great Umar Farooq. So next morning, Sayyidina Talha goes to these houses to see who he can find. And he enters one of the houses, and he finds a blind old disabled woman. And he asks the blind old disabled woman, why did this man come to you last night? And this blind disabled woman says, never mind last night. This is the same man that has been coming to my house for years. He is the one that looks after me. He is the one that cleans my house. And he is the one that takes care of my needs. And this was when Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu ta'ala anhu was the Amir al-Mu'mineen. He's patrolling the streets at night, and he passes by a house in which there is a woman, and her children are sitting next to her and they are crying because of hunger. So this woman takes a pot and she places it on the oven. Umar enters and asks, my sister, why are these children suffering? Why are they crying? She says to the Amir al-Mu'mineen, oh Umar, these children of mine are suffering, they have had nothing to eat. They're suffering from starvation. He asks, why is this pot on the oven? She says, it's only full of water. I'm pretending to cook, and maybe this way my children will tie themselves and they will sleep. Immediately Umar goes back to Madinatul Munawwara, to the public treasury, and he takes out the dates, the meat, the ghee, and some money and some clothes, and places it inside a sack. And then he tells his Khadim Aslam, load this sack on my back. And Aslam says, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, allow me to carry this for you. Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu ta'ala says to Aslam, oh Aslam, will you carry my load on the day of judgment? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me with regards to these children and their suffering and why they were crying, will you answer on that day to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on my behalf? Umar Farooq radiallahu ta'ala carries the sack himself. And not only does he do this, when he gets to the woman, he takes out the food and he puts it inside the pot. And the narration says he begins to cook himself and lights the fire. So much so that you could see the smoke coming out from the beard of Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu ta'ala an. And when the food was cooked, he didn't leave it till that, to this. He takes a spoon and he begins to feed these children with his very own hands. And after feeding the children, the Amir al-Mu'mineen sits there and he begins to play with the children. And only when he saw the smile on the children's face did Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu ta'ala anhu leave. And then he said to Aslam, "Oh Aslam, do you know why I sat there?" Aslam says, "No." Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu ta'ala anhu says to Aslam, "Oh Aslam, when I came there, I saw tears flowing from their eyes. How could Umar leave them without seeing a smile on the very same face?" In the great famine known as Amur Rimada, thousands of people would eat on his dastarkhan, on his ma'idah. And not once while the Muslims were suffering did Umar ever eat in his own home or eat in the house of any of his children or any of his daughters. He would sit with the masses and he would eat what the masses were eating. Such was the concern that he had. Yet while these Muslims were suffering in the great famine, he once wrote a letter to Amr ibn al-As in Egypt, and this is what he wrote. He wrote, "Min Abdullah Umar Amir al-Mu'mineen ila al-Asi ibn al-Asi salamun amma ba'd. Fali umri ya Amr, ma tubali idha shabi'ta anta wa man ma'ak, anna ahlaka wa man ma'i fa ya ghawtha, thumma ya ghawtha." From the servant of Allah, Umar Amir al-Mu'mineen, commander of the faithful, to the disobedient one, the son of a disobedient one. "O Amr, you don't care while you and those with you fill their stomachs, while your family, that is me and those that are with me, are suffering. Who is there to help? Who is there to help?" As soon as Amr ibn al-As received the letter of of Sayyidina Umar, such was the response that he wrote back. "Faya labbaik summa ya labbaik." "O Umar, I am here, I am here. I've sent you so many camels that this camel train is so long that you will find the first camel next to you in Madinatul Munawwara, and you will find the last of these camels with me in Misr, in Egypt." These were the believers. Why? Azizun alayhi ma anitum. These people could not tolerate the suffering or the crying of anyone that declared La ilaha illallah. Uwais Qarni rahimallah, such was the love and compassion that this man had, that he would donate even the clothes that he's wearing, and then he would sit naked inside his house. And he would not be able to go to Jummah. And then he would raise his hand and he would pray to the Almighty Allah, and he would say to Allah, "Oh Allah, Uwais has nothing. I have no food other than that which is already in my stomach. Oh Allah, I beg you, do not hold me responsible with regards to those that are suffering from amongst the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam." The great Ibn Sirin relates that a Muslim was suffering and he was told that cow's milk will benefit him. He sends a message to Ubaidullah bin Abi Bakr, "Okay, that I am suffering, I beg you send just one cow." When Ubaidullah bin Abi Bakr receives this letter, Allahu Akbar, he sends 700 cows with the shepherds, and he says to him, "Even the village in which these cows would graze, for you is my brother." For them, the dignity and the honor of a believer was far greater than dirham and dinar. And today, my young friends, we live in such an age where the dinar and dirham and the pounds and dollars are far greater than the dignity and honor of our Muslim brothers and sisters. I just want to ask you one question. Tell me, my young friends, how do you think if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was amongst us here today, how do you think Rasulullah would feel if he saw the state of his ummah? And if he saw the suffering, just in Palestine, my young friends, there are over 1.5 million Muslims in prison. 1.5 million Muslims in the greatest prison on earth. 8-meter walls all around. No people in history have ever been detained like this. 1.5 million is being detained as I address you at this moment in time, and you listen to the reminder. No food, no water. And then they're living in such distress and such agony that every day these people are waiting for death. You know, here and now, if somebody was to kill you, come, at least you're dead. There's no more suffering after this. Here every day these people are waiting for death. They do not know whether it is some bullet that will kill them. They do not know whether it is some bomb that will fall upon them. They do not know whether they will die of thirst, and they do not know whether they will die of starvation. And then when a bullet does finally hit them, what do you think happens, my brothers? Can you imagine that mother whose son has just been shot, what she has to witness? This is what she witnesses. That son of hers will die bleeding. He cannot get to the hospital. And as a result of this, they turn to radio stations asking for help. Okay, my son is dying. Is there anyone that can take him to hospital? My house has just burned. My children are dying of burns. My wife is on the verge of giving birth. Can anyone help? Just in hope that maybe one Muslim may respond to their cries. And my friends, if perchance a Muslim can respond to these cries, when he gets to the hospital, he realizes that today the hospital is choosing that who should they help to survive, because there is no electricity left in these hospitals. You know, the women are giving birth at checkpoints because they can't get to hospital. Children are being born in such a condition that the heads are double the size of the body because their mothers were inhaling phosphorus which was being dropped upon them. And the children are suffering from malnutrition, and they are hiding in cellars for days and end in total darkness. And they are so terrified, these children so terrified, that over 30% of these children, whether they are 10 years of age, 12 years of age, 15 years of age, they've lost their dignity. Why? Because they will urinate involuntarily because of fear. I don't have the time because I've already been given my notice. Let me just read just one story to you. And maybe my sisters can just listen to this one story. Just this one story, so they will realize, how Muslim women are and what they are experiencing. Just this one story. It's a very long story, so I'm going to put it short. It's with regards to this family who've just been received around 15 bombs on the same house. And this woman is relating the story, the mother. Very quickly, this is what she sees. She says, I saw Mahdi. This was her own son, and Mahdi was 17 years of age. His head was wide open and I could see his brain laying to his side. Allahu Akbar, when I read this, it reminds me of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the battle of Uhud, where that sister lost her husband, she lost her father, and she lost all and her son in the same battle. And every time she lost any member of her family, she would say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong and to Allah we will return. Ma fa'ala Rasulullah. Tell me how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. This story of the 21st century reminds me of that. And by Allah, when I read this story, you think, Allahu Akbar, that even in this age of fitna, there are people out there with such phenomenal iman that the human mind cannot even comprehend this iman. So it was a 17-year-old son, Mahdi. She says his head was wide open and I could see his brain laying to his side. I called him but received no answer. So I said, may Allah rest your soul. This is a mother. This is what she is seeing. And I look at the firmness and strength that even after this she can say, may Allah rest your soul. She says, I then saw my son Muhammad, and her son Muhammad was 16. His body was burnt out and deformed. And I called him, but only silence answered me. So I said, may Allah rest your soul. She says, I ran out from the shelling to a nearby alley. There I found my son Arafat. He was in half a body, and the lower half was completely ruptured, and his guts were dangling on the ground. I said, Arafat, my baby sweetheart, go with your brothers. Allahu Akbar. They have all left. He pulled his head up and he looked at himself. Then he started collecting his flesh and put it on what remained of his abdomen. So he was still alive. And when he saw that he's only got half a body, so his guts and part of his body that he could see near him, This son of ours was picking it up and putting it near him, thinking, he's going to survive and he'll need these bits. Yes, he was alive and looking at me. He then passed away in the hospital. Now, this is just one example that I've given you. If I had the time, I would have shared many examples. This is just Palestine. In Somalia and places like this, Allahu Akbar, you will see people who are 20, 25 years of age, but they literally weigh 3 stones to 4 stones because they have nothing. Balki, their bodies have forgotten how to digest food because for days on end they receive nothing. In places like Afghanistan, you will see people who will literally take their children and they will sell them for 10 pounds to 20 pounds. Why? Because the father cannot provide for his children. So what he will say is, come as come. At least if I sell them to somebody, at least my own flesh and blood will not die before my eyes and they will not die as a result of starvation. How do you think Rasulullah ﷺ would feel if he was amongst us today? And these helpless Muslims will ask for help. And when they see that their brothers are not responding to their cries, for the sake of a morsel, they will sell their iman. How do you think Rasulullah would feel? Knowing that the situation of some of our brothers today is such that Allah has blessed them in Qatar, in UAE, in Saudi, in Bahrain, in Dubai. Allah has blessed them so much that they could feed the entire world 10 times over and probably still get change. When our condition is such that when we wake up for breakfast, we have such a choice that if it's to be cereals, we have 10 cereals to our disposal. If we choose to have biscuits, we have 10, 20 different choices before our disposal. If we choose to have bread, we have 10 to 20 spreads before our disposal. How do you think Rasulullah ﷺ would feel? And what face will you and I be able to show on the day of judgment that while this is our condition and this is the life that we live, our brothers are dying for the sake of a morsel or selling their iman? My friends, if we are not going to wake up now, and if we do not show the same regard to our Palestinian, to our Somalian, to our Chechenian, to our Kashmiri mother and sister and brother that we have, for our own mothers, for our own brothers and for our own sisters, when are we going to show that regard? Today is so possible that the calamities are falling upon the Kashmiris or the Somalis or the Sudanis or the Palestinians or the Iraqis. But tomorrow, my friend, it could be your mother, it could be your brother, and it could be your sister. This brotherhood was a blessing of Allah, and it was the right of this brotherhood that we share these blessings that Allah has given us with our Muslim brothers and with our Muslim sisters. My time has come to an end. All I want you to do, my friends, is 3 things. 3 things, that's all I ask for. Number 1, the thing I ask for is that every one of us give our service and give some time to any charity which is within the limits of the law in this country. Come at least 1 hour a week. Why? Because this will help to soften our hearts. When you're on the field yourself, and when you witness all these tragedies with your own eyes, then I swear by Allah, even a heart of a stone will begin to melt. And then the harshness will disappear, and the love and the compassion for the ummah of Rasulullah ﷺ will enter. This is the first important thing. And the second important thing is, my friends, we need to open our hearts and donate, handsomely in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, helping our brothers. Something as much as £1 a day. Many of us, we give this much just to our children every day for luxuries, for sweets and for crisps and for chocolates. Just £1 a day, my friends. That pound will be so valuable on the day of judgment that you will find it is so possible that pound will save the life of a believer, or it may at the same time save the iman of an individual. And by the grace of Allah, we will not be short of change on the day of judgment when we realize it is so possible that just by this one little deed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala overlooks all our wrongs and gives us paradise. And the most important thing, my friends, and this doesn't cost anything, is that we need to get into a habit of making dua. Begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His mercy, just like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would spend the nights in prostration, begging for Allah's mercy upon this ummah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do this. This is the love and compassion that he had for this ummah. And this is the least that we can do, is to make the same dua every morning whenever we can in our own time, with our hearts focused, and speaking to Allah direct, one-to-one, asking Him to have mercy upon the ummah that is suffering in every dark corner of the world. Allah give me the tawfiq to act upon what I've said. Allah give you the tawfiq. Wa akhiru dawana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.